Hello everyone. This is going to be a talk about the European Convention on Human Rights, particularly with regard to Articles 2 and 3. So Article 2 is about the right to life, and Article 3 outlaws torture. So later on, not today, I'll talk about Articles 5 and 6 and the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. But anyway, what's so important about Article 2 and what's its remit? Well, there is a duty not to kill people unless absolutely unavoidable, and that signatories have to strive to maintain life. And lastly, that the authorities have to look into suspicious deaths. Was it suicide? Was it murder? Was it misadventure? How did this happen? How did this fire break out? How to prevent it happening again? That kind of thing. The Hillsborough disaster, things like that. In case you don't know, that's about 1989. In Sheffield football stadium, Sheffield Wednesday versus Liverpool, when too many people were allowed through, the gate burst through, and maybe it was a stampede. Many people died of asphyxiation. Anyway, so in this case, R. Middleton and Her Majesty's Coroner for West Somerset, the following was said: among the highest priorities of modern democratic state governed by law is the rule of law. He said one of the highest priorities is safeguarding life. Okay, because some totalitarian regimes, they don't care about the lives of their people, or things go wrong, like a dam burst in Uzbekistan recently. It's thought to be because a crony of the president got a contract through kickbacks. He jerry-built the dam, scrimping on materials to make a fat profit for himself. The dam burst, killed 4 people, but ruined many homes. And you're going to get away with that. There can be no liability, and we mustn't have that situation. So let's look at Article 2. What does it say? Well, the salient bit is, everyone's right to life shall be protected. No one shall be deprived of his life intentionally, save in the execution of a sentence. Well, the death penalty was originally there when it was written in 1948, but it's since been outlawed by Protocol 6. Okay, because remember, the death penalty was used in the United Kingdom right up until 1964, suspended in 65, abolished in 1970, and obviously by the Human Rights Act in 1998, can't bring it back, except in a crisis threatening the life of the nation. It would have to be a war so grave, there's a serious chance the UK would simply cease to exist. Okay, so let's look at deprivation of life in Article 2.2. What does it say? It says, the deprivation of life shall not be regarded as inflicted in contravention of this article when it results from the use of force that is no more than absolutely necessary. Okay, so there are situations when the police, the army, even a private individual is allowed to kill another human, right? But it has to be unavoidable. And among these grounds for doing so are defense from illegal violence, or indeed, if someone is trying to avoid lawful arrest, or you're trying to kill someone to prevent escape. So you're trying to arrest someone, the person's fighting back, and you have to use force, hit him on the head with a baton, ends up killing the person. Well, that's not a crime, hitting it like that. Or escaping from a prison, where we don't try and shoot people dead when they're escaping from the prison, but we might grab onto them as a result of which they die or something, or to quell a riot. So what is a riot? There's a large angry crowd. If they throw a stone, is that a riot? Maybe throw a stone, not a big deal. Throw 2 stones at me, pebbles, that's hurting a bit, more and more and more, hurting on the police officer more and more and more. Big rocks, bricks, that could kill, even with this helmet. Even doesn't kill me, it could do me a serious injury, could blind me, brain damage me. So do what's reasonable under the circumstances to protect yourself. So using non-lethal weapons, tear gas, so they want to disperse, something like that, water cannon. But what if the tear gas causes an asthmatic to die? Well, that wasn't murder on the part of the police. What if the water cannon causes someone to fall over, hit his head and die? Rubber bullets, no, they haven't been used in the UK since the 90s. Live rounds, kind of difficult to justify. It has to be right, it has to be not just damaging property, as it actually trying to kill people. What's trying to injure, what's trying to kill, it's not obvious. But we mustn't sort of say, well, maximum force, like the military, maximum force, let's just shoot dead everybody we think's an enemy. No, police got to use minimum force. A hostage situation, the hostage taker says, I'm going to kill the hostage in 10 seconds. A police marksman shoots him dead. That's acceptable. Bank robbery situation, if the bank robbers have opened fire on the police, sure, the police can fire back and kill them all. but shooting isn't to be your first resort. Okay, so people are sometimes killed by the state. In 1988, the Secret Intelligence Service, they got evidence, they got information that the IRA, Irish Republican Army, the terrorist organization, was going to Gibraltar. That's a British crown dependency, to try to set off a bomb and kill many people. So the three IRA activists were followed, and they were deactivated. The terrorists were shot dead by the SAS, Special Air Service. That's the unit of the British Army. So the SAS said, well, we called upon them to surrender. We thought they were going for guns. We shot them dead. But anyway, the soldiers themselves weren't liable, but there was a case for the death of McCann, Farrell, and Savage. It was found that the controlled organisation of the operation by the UK government was breached. Command and control was breached. These people were deprived of their right to life. But they're trying to kill loads of people. So surely killing them to prevent them killing others is lawful. They're trying to do unlawful violence. The state is entitled to kill people under certain circumstances. The state's an obligation to keep its people safe, including its soldiers, and that won't involve killing other people. The state, when it uses violence with premeditation, can be doing so lawfully under the right circumstances. And a terrorist organisation is always doing so unlawfully by its very nature. Now you might say, well, I agree with their cause. Okay, you do, but it's still illegal. And every sovereign state said that. I mean, I know they're armed by Libya, but I'm not sure even Libya said it was lawful. Designated a terrorist organisation by all the European countries, by the Republic of Ireland, the UK, the United States, and on, trying to destroy a democratic society. Committed so many sectarian crimes like their loyalist enemies. But anyway, they're found to have been unlawfully killed. There's some dispute as to whether they actually went for guns. So a lot of people were very hacked off with that ruling. The UK was ordered to pay some money and indeed paid it. There are other countries who fall foul of the European Court of Human Rights and just don't meet their obligations at all. Okay, let's look at the duty to safeguard life. Now, this is a positive obligation, as found by Osman and the United Kingdom in 1997. There was a case called R.A. and Lord Savile, 2001, about the Bloody Sunday inquiry. 30th January 1972, 14 people shot dead in Derry, that's in Northern Ireland. The parachute regiment shot them dead. There was an illegal civil rights, so-called civil rights demonstration. It was ordered not to go ahead. There was a very, very tense situation. They've been fighting every day for months in Derry. 2 police officers have been shot dead 2 days before. And the British Army came under attack in Derry almost every day with bricks and bottles and petrol bombs and so on. So it was very, very tense. So after the breakup of this demonstration, some people went ahead towards the army. There was some sort of confrontation. Were there bricks and bottles thrown? But anyway, then the parachute regiment opened fire and shot dead 14 people. So it was exhaustively investigated. But anyway, it's found that none of those were armed at the time they'd been shot dead. One of them had a nail bomb early in the day. One of them was part of the IRA youth wing, but that's not why he was killed. Lord Savile said it was unjustified and unjustifiable, that the army overreacted. If there was any force used on the other side, it was excessive force. The army were trying to act like police. Was it really a policing situation? Was it a military situation? Anyway, nobody's been charged in relation to that. So let's look at this risk to life. There are various contexts of this risk to life. For example, witness protection. Someone is helping the police out, or in a court case, will be killed if not protected. Prisoners have to be protected. Some prisoners in jail are at risk of being killed by other prisoners. They can be put in an isolation wing for their own safety. There's protection of identity of sources. Venables and News Group 2001 is a case in relation to that. So we look at responsibility in war. What is the duty of the state? Well, Smith, Allbutt and Ellis against Mmod is 2013 is a case like this. It's very difficult because the state can't control every individual action. There are a lot of grey areas. It's a fast-moving, fluid situation. There's the fog of war. There's a lot of confusion, misidentifying people, especially in an irregular conflict. They can't tell friend from foe or civilian. The enemy are often not wearing uniforms. And in the heat of the moment, soldiers lose their cool and overstep the mark, do what they're not allowed to, use excessive force, use against civilians, say, well, might be an enemy, kill them anyway. Could be an enemy, should kill them anyway, and you can see how they can start killing civilians willy-nilly. So Article 2 said there's a positive obligation to protect soldiers' lives. But how can you do that? In a battle, you know them are going to get killed, otherwise you better not fight. Well, we can't guarantee that none of them would get killed. have to take reasonable steps to mitigate the risk. It doesn't say that we can't send them to dangerous missions. You can, but you have to provide them with adequate equipment. Armoured Land Rovers were often not supplied in Iraq, and the British Army often died because these are roadside bombs. One of my friends who was a British Army officer there said what really scared him was roadside bombs. It was not indirect fire or even direct fire. So just because of parsimony, these vehicles weren't provided, or sufficient body armour or things. People were killed. One guy was killed because he gave his body armour to someone else. So let's look at medical law and Article 2. Again, this is a positive obligation. In Rabone and Pennine Care NHS Trust 2012 case, it was decided that this was something that was operational. It was an obligation under Article 2, and that's for those in real and immediate risk of death. So assisted suicide, well, that's not allowed. This is as per Ray Purdy and the Department for Public Prosecutions in 2009. Sir Keir Starmer, now leader of the Labour Party, was in charge of that at the time. There's another R and Department for Public Prosecutions ex parte Pritty, 2001, about Diane Pritty, who wanted to commit suicide, physically incapable of doing it herself. Could she be helped to do it? She's an adult, compos mentis, in great pain. She wants to die. She's not, mentally ill. She's said this many, many times. There's absolutely no doubt that is her will. So we can't do this. But oddly enough, it goes on in Switzerland, which is also signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights. So the state also has a duty to investigate things, and it was found to be not a minor important duty. Lord Bingham said that in R. Amin and Secretary of State for the Home Department 2003. This was a case where a young man in Feltham Young Offenders Institute, that's a prison for people under the age of 18, a boy of South Asian descent, he was put into a cell with a white supremacist who murdered him. And so the Young Offenders Institute was negligent in putting him there in a situation where he was liable to suffer heavy violence, in this case death. Now, we can't prevent all prisoners from fighting each other, but if you realise this guy is likely to be a target and you take no steps to avoid that, well, then you're negligent. Killing by agents of the state, McCann and the United Kingdom in 1996, McCann's relatives about the guy being shot dead in Gibraltar. Or Hugh Jordan and the United Kingdom in 2001. Other cases, McCurr and the United Kingdom, Kelly and others against the United Kingdom about the Lochgall ambush, 1987 I think it was, about eight heavily armed terrorists in Northern Ireland attacked a police station, and the SAS, Special Air Service, was there waiting for them, and the IRA opened fire, so the SA opened fire and killed all 8 of them. Okay, so how else would you respond? Because you can't have a police officer there with no gun or just with a handgun. These guys are heavily armed. They shouldn't have done it. And if you call upon them to surrender first, you're likely to be shot dead, the army. And so the army's going to go, obviously, tooled up, have more firepower to kill them before the army get killed themselves. And when you've killed these terrorists, they're not a threat to the public any longer. So it's amazing the way the United States get hauled over the coals in the United States. The UK gets hauled over the coals in the United States. When the United States, the police shoot dead hundreds of people every year. I remember there was the American police killed more people in 1 month than the British police killed in 100 years. Okay, Shanahan and the UK as well. Okay, so let's look at the accountability of the state. The investigation has to be impartial, has to be properly independent. The state needs to act on its own initiative, shouldn't be forced into it. The state should involve the family of the deceased as much as possible. Some would regard him or her as a victim. Others would say these people are not victims at all. They're criminals. They got what they deserved. Okay, so there's got to be a lucid outcome. We've got to know what the actual result is and recommendations. Was something done wrong? How do we prevent that happening again? Yeah, so the idea is to obviate a repeat performance. If there are any systemic failures, iron them out. So let's look at Article 3. It says, no one shall be subjected to torture or inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Notice this is our absolute right. You cannot derogate from it. You can't say, yes, but these are special circumstances, so in extremis we're throwing that out. No, not allowed to under any circumstances. That's crystal clear. So, the way that the applicant behaved is not a factor. This is in Ireland and the United Kingdom, 1979. So in 1971, internment was introduced in Northern Ireland. So suspected terrorists, both loyalists and Republican, could be arrested habeas corpus was suspended, and they could be held indefinitely without charge. They were all released in 4 years. But anyway, if you this person really had previously been convicted of being a terrorist and then subsequently went on to be a terrorist or whatever, that doesn't mean that you can subject them to inhuman or degrading treatment or torture. Anyway, how bad can the treatment be, or was it? So torture is an aggravated form of breaching Article 3. That is purposefully cruel. It's not accidentally cruel, and it is violent, hitting, kicking, punching. And if you had to hit, kick, punch, something like that because they were trying to attack you or escape, that would be acceptable. But this is gratuitous, and that's what makes it count as torture. Electric shocks, things like that. So in Ireland and the UK, 1978, there were the 5 techniques: making people stand in stress positions for prolonged periods, wearing hoods, subjected to white noise like ee! For hours, and things like that. Being taken in helicopters, being told you're going to be pushed out from hundreds of meters up, pushed out from 1 meter up, things like that. There was another case, Aksoy and Turkey, 1997. So the UK was found to have used inhuman and degrading treatment in the case of 4 men. So of all the tens of thousands of people arrested in Northern Ireland, only 4 people suffered this. Of the sort of 60 million people in the UK at the time, 4 people suffered this. Now, I don't want no one to suffer this, but we've got to keep this in perspective. It's very, very small scale. So what is inhuman and degrading treatment? Well, in Pretty in the United Kingdom, 2002, they found the following: that this is a mistreatment which reaches a minimum level of severity and involves actual bodily harm, intense physical and mental suffering. So actual body harm, as I say, could be kicking, punching, twisting, anything that causes bruises, blocking the airways, things like that. Degrading, that is where the treatment causes humiliation or indeed degrades the individual, making them feel disrespected, making them feel frightened, making them feel stressed out, making them feel individual. So the individual feel weak. They could lose their moral and physical resistance, such as there's going to be things like unnecessarily keeping them naked for a long time, deliberately making them very hot, deliberately making them very cold, withholding food and drink for a long time, like not for an hour. If it was for 24 hours, that could be things like that. Okay. So using animals like rabid dogs to frighten them, things like that. Not you have to have police dogs sometimes, that's fine. But making them stand in a room with a savage dog barking at them very loudly for a long time, that would count. Okay, so in depth, so we'll look at some of the examples. Napier and Scottish Ministers, 2005, that's a case I recommend to you. R. Spinks and Secretary of State for the Home Department, 2005. RT and Secretary of State for the Home Department, 2003, or indeed N and Secretary of State for the Home Department, 2005. These are all anonymized cases after the War on Terror began. Okay, so coming on to sentencing. In Winter, Bamber and Moore against the United Kingdom, 2003, whole life orders were challenged. People to be sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Was that inhuman or degrading or something like that? And it can be allowed but in very limited circumstances, like a serial killer or particularly sadistic murder. But usually if someone sentenced to death for murder, a tariff is set. You have a life sentence. You're eligible for parole after 5 years. I'm not joking. Sometimes it's set very, very low. Doesn't make a mockery of the whole idea of a life sentence. Is a mandatory life sentence for murder. It's the only crime for which there's a mandatory sentence in England and Wales. So the Liberal Democrats said it shouldn't be there because one guy is convicted of murder because he helped his wife commit suicide, or Tony Martin, who shot dead a burglar who came into his house. So he was out after about 3 years. But you know, your tariff could be 20 years before parole, 25 years parole. Some no chance of parole. That doesn't mean you'll get parole after 20 years if you're eligible for 20 years. Eligible for parole at 20 years, they might refuse at 20 years. It might make you come back again and again. So there was R against McLaughlin and Newell, 2014, another case concerning this. People were arguing that was inhuman, these whole life sentences. Anyway, Article 3, is it a positive obligation? Well, partly it's a negative duty, a positive duty, but it's not an absolute one. Because an absolute duty, you have an absolute duty not to torture people or cause inhuman or degrading treatment. All right? So If you have to grab someone and it causes like bruises on them, tough. Or handcuffs causing bruises, well, that's tough. There might be some force used in arresting people or suppressing a riot, that's okay, but it can't be excessive, just unwarranted. You've got them in your power, handcuffed, and you carry on beating them. No, that's not allowed. So you have to take reasonable steps to prevent individuals from being subject to prescribed treatment. But it's absolutely appalling the way this has been misused. Like this Gerald Kelly, this IRA terrorist, when he tried to escape from prison and he got some bruises as a result of it, getting paid compensation. It's shocking. Or when the RUC had to hit him on the head when he was rioting, and then he got compensation for that. So just disgusted by the injustice of that. So there are examples about deportation and extradition. R. Ullah and the Special Adjudicator, 2004. Chahal and the United Kingdom, 1997. Chahal, a Sikh guy who wanted a Sikh area in India, be independent, call it Khalistan. He was trying to rebel against the Indian government. They regard him as a terrorist. Now, some people of his organization have been tortured by the Indian state, and he said he couldn't be extradited back to India because he had a well-founded fear he'd be tortured. He won his case. He's allowed to remain within the UK. There's Suring and the United Kingdom, 1989. Okay, so I have to balance some factors. In R. Limbuela and Secretary of State for the Home Department, 2004, it said there is a spectrum of cases. There's a range, and there is an amount of discretion which is accorded to the state. Or Geza and Secretary of State for the Home Department, 2004, in which said they have to balance the public interest against the individual interest. We've got to think about the safety of the whole community. We can't let one person jeopardize that. And that was similar to the approach taken in Osman and the UK in 1997. So about Articles 2 and Article 3, they seem to be almost in conflict sometimes. Pretty and the United Kingdom, 2002, Diane Pretty, who wanted to be able to commit suicide, or R. Burke and the General Medical Council, 2005. Article 3 can outweigh Article 2 sometimes. Anyway, that's where we are. So please subscribe and book online lessons in law with me, as well as all sorts of humanities subjects, English as a foreign language, history, politics, religious studies, and get me to help you with theses, dissertations, essays, anything like that. I translate from French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian, Russian, and German, especially legal documents. Toodaloo.